Minister, why was the second stage of the environmental assessment suspended for the GTA West corridor, really after a decade of taxpayers' investment on that?
I think you actually hit the nail on the head with respect to the answer in your question. Your question talked about the fact that this is a process that began a decade ago. It began a decade ago formally, but it began, I guess, conceptually even before that point in time. And in answering some of the questions from the government caucus here today, I talked a little bit about how the entire world of transportation planning is literally transforming under our feet with new technologies, new challenges, particularly in densely populated urban and suburban areas. I recognize that a number of our partners, particularly our municipal partners, have worked closely with the province on this over the last number of years. It's why I've had the chance to speak to some of them about this, but we felt that it was important to press pause on the environmental assessment, which we announced in December, because the world of transportation is changing. And I felt that a project that began so many years ago, before anyone had heard of automated vehicles, before we had taken up the fight as we have with respect to climate change, before we were able to launch a multimodal transportation plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, before we were able to see how, for example, our growth plan was operating here in this region. I know Minister McMeekin, myself, and Minister Morrow and Minister Sousa announced some stuff earlier today in Mississauga regarding the Greenbelt and Growth Plan, that it was important for us to take stock of where we stood on this particular project to determine how best to proceed.
So you can talk about municipal partners. Vaughan, you'll know that area well. Caledon, King,
yes,
York, and Peel have all passed resolutions, and I'm sure you're in receipt of those, asking for your ministry to resume the environmental assessment.
Yes.
So when can they expect this EA to resume?
They can expect that an update will be provided, and what that update will say is not at this point something that I can comment on, because the internal review of the project is not complete. I've had the chance to speak with, I believe now, representatives from each of the municipalities you referenced a second ago. I've conveyed to them, I understand, that they have a feeling of urgency around this particular project, and I've committed to them that the review, that the entire review and the result that flows from the review will not languish, that we will provide an update as soon as the review is concluded.
Do you feel...
And they seem to accept that.
Do you feel that the GTA West corridor is a needed infrastructure project that should continue on?
I think that, again, after 10 plus years, a starting point prior to the initial growth plan that came out in 05-06, but that was given life through that growth plan, given that we are just in the process now of looking at updating the growth plan. Again, that was the announcement I participated in earlier today in Mississauga. I felt it was important for us to pause and take a look at, when you consider the size and scope of this kind of infrastructure, when theoretically it might come into service if you were to build it, and taking a look at where the world of transportation and transportation planning will be within that horizon and then beyond, because the last thing in the world I think anybody would want to do would be to inadvertently build eventually what would become potentially a stranded asset. That we need to take a look at this. It's not a small thing. This is not like a Highway 427 7-kilometer extension. Roughly, this is a 50-plus kilometer 400 series controlled access highway.
So this spring,
it was important. If I can just finish, so it was important for us after this many years to take a quick look at it, to review it internally, and to provide an update as soon as we can.
So that update, will that give some assurance to folks, including your municipal partners, as well as those that are looking at developing lands in or around that area, whose lands are in fact frozen because of this potential EA? Will this spring's announcement give some clarity to those folks, do you feel?
It's my hope that the update, when it comes, will provide clarity, but I also don't want to do anything to get too far ahead of the internal review that's underway currently. But my expectation is that we'll be able to provide clarity.
When do you expect this announcement to happen?
I can assure everybody I'd like the review to be completed and be able to provide an update as soon as possible, but we want to make sure that we get it right.
Right. Spring, it said spring 2016, right? Do you still expect it to happen in spring?
I know the review is underway, and again, as soon as we receive the review back and I've had a chance to look at it, we'll make a decision and provide the update. And that's the message I've conveyed to the municipalities as well. I get it. Nobody wants this to go on endlessly.
Hopefully you won't tell them you'll take it back. They may not like that. We know we expect it here, but I don't know about them. So have you done any sort of economic costing in terms of what the economic cost of the province would be if the EA doesn't follow through? If there's been any, I guess that's what the committee is tasked with studying as well. Is there any economic studies that they'll be doing in terms of the corridor not proceeding?
Again, I guess I would call it the scope of the review is fairly open-ended, and so I would anticipate that the review would cover off.
How much time left, guys?
The review would cover off a number of
3
topics,
seconds.
including areas or topics like the one you just referenced.
Have you had a chance to speak to some of your municipal partners who've put forward resolutions, including your own municipality?
I believe the list that you gave earlier, I believe I've either met with or spoken to municipal representatives from each of those municipalities, yes.
What about some of the private sector organizations? Have you had a chance to meet with them that I'm sure have corresponded with your office about this particular project?
I think in terms of formal correspondence, it's been a relatively limited number, but certainly people have approached me over the last 4 or 5 months. And the message I've heard over and over again, which I respect, is just don't let it languish forever, because we're all looking for some degree of certainty, having participated in the process now for a few years. And I respect that, and that is the undertaking that I'm giving. That's the commitment that I'm making. It will not languish. It will be reviewed, and we'll provide an update as soon as we can.
What are, finally, because I've got 2 minutes left, I mean, what would you say the top 3 priorities for you are this year? Would they be? And I know it sounds like a bit of a government
This feels like
question.
a job interview.
I know I probably stole one of their questions already, but
If I was an animal, what kind of animal would I be?
tell us what your top 3 priorities are in your portfolio right now.
So number, Del Duca, why are you so great? Anyway, number 1 priority always is maintaining road and highway safety. Number 2 would be continuing to advance and build out the infrastructure, both public transit and traditional transportation infrastructure we need, so that our quality of life continues to be strong, and also so that our economy can continue to grow. And I think the last priority for me is to continue to be as open-minded as possible, so as to help enable some of the outcomes that I referenced a second ago when discussing some of the emerging technologies. Those are probably, just off the top of my head really quickly, 3 significant priorities for me for
Finally,
this year.
you and I spoke about ride sharing and some of the disruptive technologies. You saw how your government, you really allowed Toronto to go it alone. You see in Ottawa what's happening there. We met about a year ago. What have you done since we met, and what will you plan on bringing forward, if anything, to actually provide rules for ride sharing that would be consistent right across the province?
So I don't know how much time we have, but I would say really quickly on this, to me there's a difference between vehicle sharing and ride sharing. I think when I talk about what's happening in the transportation realm, generally speaking, and
Sorry, Minister, that's our time. And there's no more time, so I apologize to all folks that were in the middle